The Story of the White House by Kate Waters. I pray heaven to bestow the best blessings on this house and on all that shall hereafter inhabit it. May none but honest and wise men ever rule under this roof. John Adams to his wife, Abigail, in a letter written the day after he moved into the White House. The White House belongs to everyone in our country. The President of the United States works and lives here. The White House is in Washington, D.C., the capital of our country. The people who run our country work there. The city is filled with important buildings. Alaska and Hawaii are out of scale and out of position. The reading room in the Library of Congress, the Justice Department, new paper money, the Capitol building, the Supreme Court. The Library of Congress has one copy of every single book copyrighted in the United States. It is the largest library in the world. New money for the whole country is printed at the Bureau of Engraving and Printing. The Congress meets in the Capitol building. Government lawyers work in the Justice Department. In the Supreme Court building, 9 Supreme Court justices decide whether rulings made in other courts are good or bad. Important decisions are made in the White House. Leaders from all around the world come to meet with the president. The House is a symbol of our country and our kind of government, which is called a democracy. Like most big old houses, there are stories told about the people who live there and special things that happened there. Here's the story of the White House. View into the Red Room. Washington, D.C. has not always looked like it does today. Once it was a sleepy little village with only a few buildings. There were no good roads into the village and no good docks for boats. About 200 years ago, when the United States was a brand new country, people began to talk about where the president should live. Should the president live in the North or the South? Should the president's house be a palace like kings live in, or a simpler house? Washington, D.C., seen from across the Potomac River. George Cook, 1833. The Franklin Square House, New York City. The Macomb House on Broadway, New York City. The Morris House, Philadelphia. While Congress debated what to build and where to build it, our first president, George Washington, lived in 3 houses. The first 2 were in New York City. The third was in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Finally, Washington decided to compromise. He picked a patch of land on the Potomac River. Both Maryland and Virginia gave land for the new capital. The land was on the border of the North and the South. At this time, there were no Western states. George Washington named the land of the District of Columbia in honor of Christopher Columbus, Benjamin Banker, and Andrew Ellicott. President Washington hired people to plan a new city. Washington, D.C. is one of the only cities in the world that was designed before it was built. First, Benjamin Banker and Andrew Ellicott made maps of the land. Pierre Charles L'Enfant. Then Pierre Charles L'Enfant decided where to put the roads. Washington decided to put the Capitol building on a hill at one end of the city, and the president's house on the hill at the other end. Now, it was time to decide what kind of house to build for the president. Thomas Jefferson suggested having a contest. He advertised the contest in newspapers across the country. A committee picked a simple but elegant design by James Holbein, a young Irish American architect. The first stone was laid on October 13th, 1792. It took 8 years to finish enough of the house to make it livable. Even then, Washington, D.C. was a rough, unfinished city. The Capitol building wasn't completed yet, and congressmen lived in boarding houses surrounded by farmland. John Adams, the second president of the United States, moved into a cold, damp White House in November 1800. Abigail Adams hung her laundry up to dry in the East Room. She thought it would be bad manners to hang the president's laundry outside. James Hobon's winning drawing. Proposed additions to the White House. By the time our third president, Thomas Jefferson, moved into the White House in 1801, most of the outside structures were finished. The White House was the largest residential house in America. Jefferson ordered wallpaper and furniture from France. Every president since has ordered special things for the house. Today you can see chairs that people sat on more than 100 years ago. During this time, the building was called the President's Palace and then the President's House. Gilbert Stuart's portrait of George Washington. Then James Madison was elected president. During his term of office, the United States went to war with England. It was the War of 1812. As the British troops got close to Washington, Madison's wife, Dolly, ordered a carriage to pick her up and take her to safety. But she would not leave the house until two men agreed to take down the famous portrait of George Washington. The troops set fire to the Capitol building and the White House. Today, the picture that Dolly saved is the only thing that had been in the White House since it first opened. The burning of Washington, D.C. by the British in 1812, with the White House in the background, wash drawing. After the fire, about 1831, 1860, about 1900. When the war was over, the house was rebuilt and repainted white to cover the smoke marks. People began to call it the White House. People all over the world think of the White House as the symbol of our country. The White House stands for freedom. The president signs laws that affect all of us. Leaders from other countries come to the White House to meet with the president. There are also parties and special ceremonies at the White House. You can visit the White House too. It is open for tourists almost every day of the year. More than 1 million people visit every year. Some lucky visitors even see the president or the first lady walking down the halls. People who visit see only part of this big house. There are 132 rooms in all. On the official tour, visitors only see 7 rooms and 3 halls. Each room is filled with precious old furniture and objects. The White House is also a museum. When you enter the White House, the first thing you see is the Secret Service station. The Secret Service people are specially trained police officers. You may notice the little earphones in their ears. They can give and receive messages about any possible danger. The State Dining Room. These are some of the rooms you can see on the official White House tour. The State Dining Room is big enough for 140 people to sit down and eat. The East Room is the biggest room in the White House. This is where the President and the First Lady give parties. Sometimes workers set up a stage for music concerts and dance performances. Presidents have also held press conferences here. The East Room, the Entrance Hall, the library. The White House Library has 2,700 books in it. All of the books are by American authors. The president's family can take books from here to read. The Green Room, the Blue Room, the Red Room. Other famous rooms you can see have color names. The West Wing, the Oval Office. Let's look at some of the rooms most people never see. The president's office is in the West Wing of the White House. It is called the Oval Office because it is shaped like this, an oval. There are two flags behind the president's desk. One is the flag of our country, the other is the presidential flag. Each president chooses his own furnishings.